advocacy group My Vote Counts is expressing concern that the Electoral Matters Amendment Act may undermine political party funding transparency. The organisation has vowed to ensure that it does not become the case. Political party funding researcher Robyn Pasensie joins me now to talk more about this concerning issue. So, Robyn, good morning. And I think as an obvious starting point, by the way, good morning. Welcome. Thank you very much for your time. We forget our manners sometimes. Tell us why you're worried. This is an important matter as it relates to, who the potential puppet masters might be in some instances behind the scenes on how, political parties might make their choices and how they operate going forward. So what bothers you the most?
Absolutely. I mean, that is a big concern, but actually there are some practical reasons why we are really, I would say, incensed. And much of that has actually transpired within the last hour. The National Assembly met and there was a motion on the order paper today to discuss making a resolution to set the limits, so the disclosure limit and the upper limit for donation. And that has been postponed to next week. Last night, we had confirmation that the president gave a commencement date for the Electoral Matters Amendment Law as it is now, and its commencement date was yesterday, the 8th of May. So as of yesterday, and up until the National Assembly meets to make that resolution, we have no limits. In other words, if anybody is going to make a donation to a political party, they will be under no legal obligation to declare and have that be publicly made available for anybody to see what their donation is. So we are exceptionally concerned around that. And this is something that we raised during our submission, which we've said constantly. We've written to the president on this matter as well. And now we sit with essentially our worst case scenario, and this secrecy around funding, I think, is really going to be increased now.
And let's home in then, if we can, Robyn, on some of these specific concerns you have about having too much power in the hands of the president, or given to the president to be able to set the limits or the upper limit on those donations, but also about the issue of where this could disproportionately benefit individual party political interests and affect the status quo or the equality on the political playing field in South Africa.
Absolutely. So one of our concerns was in the amendment bill before it became law was that the way in which it was written said that, of course, the president must receive a resolution from the National Assembly before he can set thresholds. However, it is up to him solely. It is at his discretion alone to set what these limits are. He is the president not only of the country, but also of his party. This is a massive institutional bias. It means that you can set limits to such a high degree. I mean, you can say hundreds of millions of rands, for example. And what that means is that you are securing funding for your political party. Now, we're not saying political parties should not be funded. What we are saying is individuals who seek to undermine our politics with these large donations should not be allowed to do so. And that's one major issue that we have. The second one is that until the National Assembly makes such a resolution, which it's as of an hour ago did not do, it means there are no limits. So we are going to have a free-for-all of possibly donors making multi-million rands of donations that we are just not going to see.
So what happens next, though? You've talked about, that there will be, there's still going to be some discussion on some of the points, particularly around disclosure and the threshold. How do you see this evolving?
Well, I think for us as My Vote Counts, what will be evolving for us is that we will need to be seeking urgent legal advice and action around this. It's enshrined in our Constitution, access to information, and also in our laws, specifically access to private funding information. It's supposed to ward off possibilities of corruption, of undermining democracy. So we see this as a really urgent need, and for us, that will be the next steps. In terms of Parliament, what we need to see happen is for that resolution to be passed so the president can set thresholds, but it's also a time crunch. sixth Parliament will be dissolved on the 21st of May in the run-up to the elections. So if it's not done between now and the 21st, we are not going to have that, and we're going to have to wait for the new Parliament to deal with this issue.
So, I mean, there have been a number of other voices in Parliament, you know, despite civil society voice, besides civil society voices, you've got the opposition parties and some of the other parliamentary legal advisors voicing some of their concerns around the constitutionality of this bill. You know, we had a discussion yesterday on the celebration of the Constitution and the fact that it is a living, breathing document that has to reflect you know, society, contemporary society. And here's another opportunity to kind of tweak, hone, and just tighten some of the provisions in law, particularly on important issues like this when it comes to the expression of your democratic voice and your democratic right. Just talk to us from a bigger perspective, just on, you know, some of the amendments or the laws relating to our electoral process and where they sit right now in responding to some of the demands of democratic society. One of them is what we're talking about now, transparency around funding, so that we can get higher levels of accountability and understand what's happening there, and that there's no unfair advantage to one party over the other. But what are some of the other observations you make in how these laws are coming together to represent, you know, democracy better and to defend democracy better?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, I agree with you. We have the Constitution, which is a living, breathing document, and it must respond to the needs of South Africans. It must respond to the needs of the people who live in this country. And in answering your question, we have had sort of continuous processes since 1994 about looking at the laws that we have in place and seeing, do they actually fit? And within the last few years, particularly last year, in terms of making sure our electoral system can give full expression to democracy, it had sort of a major overhaul, which is not actually quite complete. But what we have had come out of that was the Electoral Amendment Law, which amended our electoral system to allow for independence. So that is one of the major things that has happened in terms of increasing representatives, increasing, I imagine, the responsiveness of democracy to the needs of the people. And it's actually that law that kicked off the legislative process for the Electoral Matters Amendment Law as it is now, because they are connected pieces of legislation. So the Political Party Funding Act is one of those that are now affected by the inclusion of independent candidates. And this particular law now signed was meant to make those changes. So sort of as a broad overview looking in, this is making changes to law, amendments, passing new laws is precisely the job of Parliament. And I just want to throw it back to our upcoming election. So when you vote and that representative sits in Parliament, their main function is to do exactly what you have said now, is to assess whether our legislation is actually giving effect to the ideals of the Constitution and is few pieces of legislation I mentioned now, the ones that have just happened in the last sort of 18 months, and they've already significantly changed the electoral landscape.
All right, Robyn Pasensie, thank you very much. This is something all South Africans should be very interested in watching how it develops and finally comes to a head. We're talking about the Electoral Matters Amendment Act, and that was a political party funding researcher, Robyn Pasensie. Appreciate your time.